Hello! I didn't see you there. Sorry about that. How are you? My name is Nadie, and welcome back to another Cold Blood and Cocktails. As you beautiful people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of positive energy, okay? Thank you. Oh, my perky little parrots, how you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world, you're having a marvelous day so far. I, myself, couldn't be any better. I've got my bling, I've got my parrot, what more could a gal want? Oh my gosh, so much wig hair, But before we hop into today's story, today's drink is just orange juice with a little splash of strawberry schnapps, peach schnapps, and blue Curaçao. It's so good too. You actually might not know this about me, but I am a huge fashion lover. I've been a fashion photographer for like years. You'd never know this because I'm rarely ever out of sweatpants, but honey, before Miss Rona, I was at New York Fashion Week sitting at shows, and do I have some celebrity stories to tell you, but we'll save that for a different day. Okay, this wig is gonna be the death of me, and no pun intended. But point of the fucking story is, I love fashion, yet I've never really heard anything about this, and quite truthfully, I'm not even certain how I feel about the brand itself after doing this. But this is definitely one of the most under-publicized stories in my opinion. Like, we all know about the death of Giovanni Versace, the tragic suicide of my personal favorite designer, Alexander McQueen, and then while doing research for this case, I found so many more interesting deaths or mysteries around some of the top designers in the world. Like, it's crazy. So please let me know if you'd like me to cover any of those stories, or honestly, any stories around celebrities, because some of the things that I found are just very intriguing. It's crazy what money and fame can cover up, and I guess cheers to that. It's not a very good cheers. But today's episode was certainly inspired by the very popular movie House of Gucci, not to be confused with my roommate's old bedroom slash brothel House of Gucci. But I've actually not even seen the movie. I honestly don't know that I ever will. I don't have the attention span to sit and watch a movie, especially a nearly 3-hour long one. Like, holy tits. But the biggest reason I didn't watch it was just because the Gucci family was a little bit miffed at some, I guess, I don't know, inaccurate portrayals. I mean, after all, it is Hollywood. They have to juice shit up and switch things around so that it makes a good movie. So there's just so many details to this story. I want to misconstrue as little as possible, so I'm just telling my story based off my own research. If you saw the movie, that's fabulous. Let me know how this version compares, but if you're not down for watching the movie, we have a much shorter and much more condensed version, at least hopefully shorter. You know what? I think my bangs are just gonna have to like fall, and that's how they're gonna be. But like I said, this is a very, very watered down version, more leaning on the history of Gucci rather than the murder, because it's kind of crazy to know the things that led up to the murder. But I'm gonna tell you right now, you better take some Dramamine, because the twists and turns in this jizz fest might have you a little bit motion sick. If me moving this parrot doesn't give you motion sickness before that. But really, I would have to be here a whole freaking week just to tell you the full story. Like, there are so many interesting tidbits that are still coming out of this story today. So yeah, the movie might be a little bit more detailed and lubed up, but the story today is gonna fuck you just as hard. So I think this is actually our first international story. It starts in March of 1995 in Milan, Italy, just as I'm about to head to bed at 8:30 in the morning. Maurizio Gucci was walking around town, strutting in his loafers, making his way to the office, just trying to figure out how to make a little bit of extra cash, because at this point he had been booted from being the chairman at his family's famous fashion empire, Gucci. And just as he's walking into the building, he feels someone come up behind him, and before he knew it, everything went black. He had been shot 3 times. And then just to make sure he was good and gone, the assassin fired one last shot into his head. The assassin starts to flee, and at that point, some guy comes around the corner and starts shooting at the assassin. It was fucking chaos, man. The assassin ends up getting a bullet in the arm, runs to the street to an escape car, and just leaves. Like, what the fuck? Who the hell does that? I guess a killer does that. That makes sense. But really, right in fucking broad daylight, how sloppy. The reactions to Gucci's death were very mixed. Of course, everyone was sad. A lot of people were like, oh my goodness, how could this happen? But then other people were like, it's not a matter of how could Gucci have enemies, it's more like which of Gucci's enemies finally brought him down. Some people are like, maybe this is the mafia. It wouldn't be that far-fetched for the Guccis to have ties with them somehow. But then after just a couple minutes, police realized that had this been a professional killer, they would have done literally anything not to be noticed. Yet 3 witnesses saw this shit go down in broad daylight. So they ruled the mafia out, and police start digging more into the Gucci family themselves. Like, yeah, this guy was famous, but that doesn't automatically make you a target. I mean, if that were the case, every celebrity would have been taken out by now. Well, now there was word going around town that this could have been because of a family vendetta from years ago. Like, honey, there were were shitstorms flying from every angle with this family. It was crazy. But police were also finding that there was some fierce hatred between Maurizio and his ex-wife Patrizia that was still burning pretty hot even a decade after he left her. And I guess the little tiff between those two wasn't the only bad blood in the family. Apparently, regular brawls and catfights were pretty frequent between the members, and at one point, I guess there was designer handbags thrown all over the Gucci lawn because the family members were just hurling them at each other in a heated argument. That was probably the most expensive and beautiful fight ever. Like, you know, my ass would just be sitting there behind a tree waiting for one of them to look away so I can snag me some rent money. The cops are like, obviously shit gets shaken with the Guccis real often and real quick. Maybe we should be looking at the family for a motive. So they start their investigation right at the beginning of the Gucci fame in 1921. They started with Guccio Gucci. That was actually his real name, Guccio Gucci. That's like calling somebody Tammy O Tammy. I'm not here to name shame, but it's just a very interesting choice. Anyways, he started his little family journey with a small leather goods shop in Florence that really mainly catered to the rich. Like, if you were anybody who wanted to be somebody, you went to Guccio Gucci. And it was actually really smart because the area was really well known for its artisan craftsmanship, so he was able to employ the best of the best and keep the quality consistent, like, even up to today. Like, you gotta admit, their shit is still fucking banging. It's the quality, man. It's just, I will cheers to that. But over the span of like 20 years, Guccio really grew his company from this small operation to a large scale. So much so that Gucci could actually hire on his 3 sons to help run the business. Well, now with fresh young eyes in the company, the sons were like, yo daddy-o Guccio, we need to expand. Things are really hopping in New York City. This would be the perfect spot for another store. Like, let's fucking do it. Guccio was like, why? We can just stay in Italy. But the sons were like, nah dad, trust us. In New York, we'd have 100 times the opportunities that we could ever have here. Like, let's just do it. And at this point, they were very financially stable. So yes, it was a risk, but even if it tanked, they could afford the failure. So they loaded up their truck and they moved to Beverly. Wait, no, sorry, wrong story. They moved to New York. The wig's a little tight. I'm getting confused up in here. Oh, you know what? Maybe so much hair wouldn't blow into my face if my fan wasn't blowing right at my wig. Whew. Anywho, now we all know that that move to New York was about the best damn thing they ever could have done. Suddenly, they weren't just catering to the rich, but also the elite, celebrities, famous CEOs. Unlike in Italy, in New York, people didn't come to Gucci to become somebody. People who came to Gucci were already somebody. Around the world, suddenly Gucci became a household name. People aspired to own a Gucci piece. Some people just aspired to go into a Gucci store. Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra were now walking around town in Gucci shoes, and before you know it, the Gucci family is schmoozing with princesses and countesses and celebrities from around the world. And this feeling was addicting for the family. Like, you can't just be partying with royalty one day and then stop the next day. You gotta keep that train rolling, baby. It was like heaven for the family. Finally, all of their hard work paid off and they were living it up. At the time, the power was perfectly balanced between Guccio and the sons, and everyone really worked harmoniously. That is, until the sons began having children. One son had 3 sons and another, Rodolfo, had one whose name was Maurizio. And even though Maurizio was surrounded by riches and anything that he could want, he grew up kind of a sad boy. He was very lonesome because he had no siblings to play with, and his mother died when he was like 5. And because Maurizio was really all Rodolfo now had, he was very protective of his son and kept him like overly sheltered. And apparently Rodolfo was actually a very well-known actor who appeared in over 40 Italian films with the stage name of Maurizio, and then ended up naming his son after that name. Like, get a theater queen. But as Maurizio grew up, shit really started to go pear-shaped because the balances of power just began to adjust. There was now more people to divide the company by. So now Maurizio and his dad Rodolfo owned half of the company, and then the other half had to be divided by the uncle and the 3 cousins. So I guess there were feelings like, we are literally at the same level and should be equals, yet you make more than I do and have more power. And so this just started like a big war between the family. And then to add to that stress, even though this was a family operation that was handed down, it seems like the elder Guccis kind of failed to mention to the youngins all of the financial secrets that they had. Their bank account was big, but that vault of secrets, it was bigger. Well, one day, one of the cousins, Paolo, was looking into the old sales records and was like, hold the fuck up. Why in 1978 did the US Gucci shop show that we had $48 million in sales, but we have no profit? Like, bitch, make it make sense. Do you get it? No, I didn't think so. And Paolo really kept prying into this, not realizing that almost all of the $48 million had been siphoned into offshore accounts by his dad and his uncle. Like, that's a big whoopsie. He was not supposed to stumble on that. Paolo, of course, eventually found out what happened to this money and spent sleepless nights pilfering through documents and and records until he finally found the proof that he needed, and what does he do? His ass brings his uncle and his dad to the US courts. Money, honey, it is not cute. Well, the court really has no choice other than to favor Paolo, and so he sends his own 81-year-old father to spend an entire year of his life in jail. I mean, obviously there was some shady shit going on in the family, but I feel like a normal family just would have talked this out. But not this family. They went straight for the danglers and only had money on their minds. Like, if putting a family member in jail or even taking them out meant a higher profit, I wouldn't put it past them. But I bet you they throw a good party. But Paolo really wasn't the only shit stirrer here. Maurizio, the quiet and shy cousin, had fallen head over designer heels over a woman named Patrizia Reggiani, who also seemed to have a steaming pile of horseshit to contribute, so yay for that. Patrizia, she was, I guess, a whoopsie child between a wealthy baron and a waitress. The waitress eventually married the baron, which guaranteed Patrizia a life of riches and privilege, so in her eyes, she was pretty much on the same wealth level as Maurizio, but she was still a nobody in that she had no social status. Like, she knew a connection with the Guccis would put her on the social level that she craved. Plus, Patrizia did look a little bit like Liz Taylor, which had Maurizio smitten. And really, in the beginning, I do think they were truly happy, and Patrizia would later say that they made the perfect team and were just so in love. His dad, Rodolfo, oops, sorry, baby. His dad, Rodolfo, though, really wasn't too keen on this queen. Remember, Maurizio was a parent, but he was like the overbearing parent, and I think Maurizio just kind of had enough of him taking control of his life. And I'm not sure, maybe Rodolfo's dislike of Patrizia may have even fueled his love for her even more. Like, for those of us who have been young and in love, we get it. Defiancy is a very relatable feeling. Rodolfo honestly thought that Patrizia was basically a gold-digging potato. Not necessarily just for the money, but more so the Gucci name and the fortune, and I mean, he wasn't that wrong, was he? Although that's getting ahead of ourselves, let's strap our titties back and reel it in. Rodolfo really wasn't shy about letting his son know how he felt about his girlfriend, but Maurizio wouldn't have anyone tear her down like that, and he started standing up to his father for the first time probably ever. And then, to really piss off his dad, what's he go and do? He marries Patrizia. Oh my bloody taint. If I were the parent, I'd be livid. Especially because Maurizio had such an incredibly privileged life, so he may not have known like real life repercussions. It's not like when you're a kid and you put a bottle tab on some random girl's finger that you just met in the park. And I get where Rodolfo was coming from, because at least he didn't grow up around, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, so he kind of had some idea what normal was, where it seems his son appeared to be in a little bit of a fairy tale world. Well, when the news of Maurizio and Patrizia's marriage made its way to Rodolfo, of course, he didn't take too kindly to this. In fact, he was so pissed that he didn't speak to Maurizio for months. But I suppose even if you're a Gucci, family is family, and one family member convinced them to kiss and make up, and Rodolfo's like, come here, my child, let's make peace and pasta. Meh. So the family business continues, it flourishes, and meanwhile, Patrizia is busy molding Maurizio like a fucking work of art. Not exactly like the Patrick Swayze sculpting scene in Ghost, but she turned him into a corporate mogul, or I guess more so made him want to become one. She introduced him to all the right elites and really escalated his career, and despite this career advancement, the Gucci family really still never accepted her. Like, she'd fit into the crowd at a party, but she just didn't fit into the family. Like, she was egocentric, she was conceited, a total prima donna, and just waltzing into a family that's already dysfunctional as fuck and saying, okay, well, I'ma take over now. That shit didn't fly too well, as one could imagine. But I'm actually a little bit surprised because the Gucci family cared more about money than familial bond. Like, obviously, they had no issue putting their relatives in jail and would have like 20 different lawsuits going at a time. So when someone comes into the family and presents ideas to make this empire even larger, you'd think the family would just welcome them in with open arms. But of course, no, the family just wanted money, and to keep that money within their own walls. They wanted fame and fortune and everything that goes with it, so the young Guccis with dollar signs in their eyes decided to sell their double G logo to literally anyone that would buy it. Like, if a manufacturer was offering enough cash, the Gucci logo would be theirs, which, as you can imagine, really kind of cheapened the brand. Like, yeah, they were making money because all these manufacturers were paying good money for the logo, but the point of a high-end brand is that it's difficult for just anyone to attain, and suddenly everyone and their fucking housekeeper's dog could afford some type of Gucci, whether it was a keychain or a pad of paper. And if everyone can have it, then nobody wants it. Like, popularity doesn't equate success in the long run, and Maurizio was starting to take a look at the numbers and saying, we gotta stop this shit. Like, we need to become an exclusive brand again and stop being sellouts just for money. Which I totally understand both business aspects, like they want to make a lot of profit, that's great. However, I kind of favor Maurizio's way of thinking because he was thinking into the future versus is in the moment like the rest of the family. Yes, in the moment they were making dough faster than they could spend it, but what happens when everyone has a Gucci item and nobody cares about the brand anymore? Shit's just gonna tank, and this family business is like all they have. It needs to last for generations to come. Cheers to you for that one, Maurizio. That is smart. So, of course, the family calls a business meeting, and of course, Paolo brings a little tape recorder for legal purposes. Everything is always about legality with this family, but nobody really knows what happened during the meeting. It's just said that there was a kerfuffle. Someone tried to grab the recorder, and Paolo somehow ended up with a huge scratch on his face near his eye. At this point, he grabs his tape recorder, flies out of the room, runs out of the building, and all the passersby on the streets are just sucking up the Gucci drama like it was fucking liquid gold. Paolo serves his family with a $2 million lawsuit saying that his brothers and his family held him down and beat him up. Like, what the actual fuck? But honestly, there is so much more to that story, and it's only like one of hundreds like it. The family was fucking crazy, and it was kind of weird because a lot of brands would tank the moment they had a public scandal, but every Gucci family scandal just made their brand become even more popular. People were just fascinated by the Guccis because they had everything that most humans want: family, friends, status, money, yet they were so unhappy and were always finding new ways to tear each other to shreds. And I think the public liked seeing this so much because it just proves to you that money and success doesn't bring you happiness. And I think people found some sort of comfort in knowing that even though their bank account would never be as supple as the Gucci's, at least they were happy with their lives and could sit back, eat their TV dinners, and watch these elite lives just go to shit. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. Like, Maurizio really wanted to reclaim the company's prestigious status, but the cousins just wanted to sell their trademark to every Dick and Harry that would buy it. Or every Harry Dick that would buy it. You never know. However, the time for rebuilding their status was absolute perfection. By now it was like the 1980s, and the fashion world had really taken notice of Italy. Suddenly Milan was the new Paris, and Maurizio knew that Gucci could be an absolute pillar in this sudden wave of high fashion, and he knew that would only happen if they reverted to upscale clientele again. So when Maurizio's dad Rodolfo passed away in 1983, Maurizio inherited the entire half of the company, as well as just a humble $230 million. And Patrizia, remember her, she was at the height of her human molding at this point and really encouraged Maurizio to seize control of the brand and redefine the label as being geared towards the super rich. And I'm not going to defend her, but it honestly does make sense. I get it. But Maurizio only owned half the company. His cousins and uncle, who owned the other half, would not budge. They liked the company as it was because it was easy money, it was a constant cash flow. They were rich and greedy, but Maurizio was like, if we keep putting our name on literally everything, momentum is gonna crash, money's gonna go downhill, and the gravy train is just gonna dry up. And while Maurizio was fighting for his family's company with Patrizia in his ear, she's in his other ear saying, you don't have time for your daughters, you don't have time for me, you're a terrible father, you're not doing enough of this, you're not doing enough of that, and basically she was saying she could do so much better, blah, blah, blah. In the beginning, I do really think that they married for love, but later on, I think she loved the glitz and the glamour more than she could love any human being. Patrizia's bitching to him left and right, Maurizio has his foot out the door one toe at a time, and Miss Thing over here had no idea that their marriage was about to blow the fuck up. Maurizio was starting to realize how manipulative Patrizia was being, and one day he was like, fuck this, fuck you, I'm out of here, deuces. So he packed an overnight bag, told Patrizia and his girls that he was just going down to the Florence Gucci factory for a business trip, kissed Patrizia on the head, kissed his girls goodbye, and never came back. Needless to say, Patrizia was gobsmacked. She felt blindsided. Surely you can imagine the shock when she realized that she might have to give up her $800 house slippers and $5,000 shopping sprees and daily visits to the spas because her husbando wasn't providing her a lavish life anymore. Oh no, what is one to do? Well, after the separation, she keeps a suspiciously close eye on all of his finances. After all, even if she didn't get any of his money, at least their children would, and she wanted to make sure he didn't dry the bank account up. Like, heaven forbid she leave the kids anything. No, it has to be all his money. But Maurizio used his time away to reconstruct the brand and give it a plan to flourish. And just as he was about to pull that trigger, he was about to go through with the rebranding plan, and his pissed off cousin Paolo dropped a big titty-sized bombshell. He took documents to the police showing that Maurizio had purchased his multi-million-dollar boat using funds from his father's old offshore accounts, which put him in hot water for tax evasion. Like, this family really just goes for the jugular, and they don't fuck around. So when authorities show up to Maurizio's house, he hops his little ass onto his motorcycle and flees to his country villa up in the Swiss Alps. I mean, haven't we all done the same? So now Maurizio's like, how the fuck am I gonna get my family out of this family business. He was calling them, asking to buy them out and get full ownership, but they just weren't having it. And why would they? It was like a constant cash flow. Like, they'd have to be crazy to give that up. They literally have to do no work except sell their logos to manufacturers that want to buy it, and boom, paycheck. But Maurizio found an investment group that was actually interested in Gucci and would help convince the family to sell. And Maurizio knew exactly which chain link was the weakest and should be approached first. Paolo. Paolo really hated Maurizio, like really hated him. But he loathed his brothers and his father even more, so to no one's surprise, Paolo sold his shares out of spite and revenge. And Maurizio now had over 50% of the company, which basically makes the other shareholders' opinions garbage. So it'd really only be a matter of time till the rest of the family sold their 10 or 15% out to the investment company as well. And for a very hot and steamy minute, it seemed like things were really going well for Maurizio. His name had been cleared of any evasion charges, and he was now able to run the company as he saw fit. He was the only remaining Gucci in the brand. He brought on Tom Ford as the head designer, and suddenly Gucci was more than expensive bags and shoes. They were now a high fashion clothing house as well, which sounds like an excellent plan, does it not? High fashion? Count me in, mama. Strap on a parrot and call it a day. Well, unfortunately, what goes up must come down, and Maurizio really had wonderful intentions, but he just did too much too quickly, and he made way too many changes in a short amount of time. Like, part of the brand's relaunch as a high-end company was to immediately get rid of all cheap licensing that his cousins had allowed, which made up like 90% of Gucci profits. So doing away with that made for a loss of $100 million company dollars and $40 million of Maurizio's personal dollars. I say personal dollars in quotes because it wasn't even his money. The company was just really sinking fast, and they were going into what seemed like irreversible debt. He was running the company past the ground and like straight into the basement. At this point, Maurizio owed the bank millions and millions of dollars, and they were getting pissed, like they wanted their money. But then suddenly, he had the money. How? Well, by borrowing it from one of the most wanted men who was also an accused terrorist and was on the run from the police. So Maurizio was like, okay, I gotta cut back. Of course, he still kept both the Ferraris, his yacht, his Swiss chalet, but slashed Patrizia's monthly allowance from $150,000 to a mere $90,000. And oh my god, she was fuming. Like, how is anyone supposed to live on anything less than $100,000 a month? Oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Simply preposterous, like serious broke bitch problems, for real. But was the $60,000 a month pay cut enough to justify killing him? Maurizio was like, honestly, I have way more important things to tend to than my bitter ex's lush life. He had found that his transition of power made him more enemies than friends, and he was continuing to run the business almost into bankruptcy. He was still convinced, though, that he could turn it around and take the company higher than it had ever been before. And a talented man Maurizio surely was, he didn't inherit his grandfather's business sense. Like, his grandpa was the driving force behind the start of the company. The sons were the forces behind expanding globally, but by the third generation, any knowledge of business kind of flew out the door. At this point, they were already so well established, so Maurizio and the cousins didn't need to learn how to take a company from the ground up. Maurizio was at rock bottom, and he had no idea what the fuck to do. So by 1993, the business was now hemorrhaging money. The investment company tried to stop the bleeding by letting go of Maurizio. After all, they joined on to fix the company and not have a little trickle of profit here and there. They had their eyes on the prize with like serious big dick energy and wanted the big bucks. And so for the first time, there were no Gucci's within the brand. Maurizio ended up parting with a gift of $120 million for his shares, and he was happy with that, as anyone should be. But you know which money-hungry chickapoo wasn't happy with this? I'll give you two guesses, but I'm sure you'll only need one. Yes, it was Miss Patrizia, because you know what? $120 million just isn't enough to comfortably live on for the rest of their lives. Like, they'd be on the streets in no time. Or more importantly, she'd be on the streets. Her income from Maurizio had already been sliced down. Now her status as Gucci heiress was crumbling around her, and this was so freaking embarrassing for Patrizia. Like, she couldn't be the first lady of Gucci if there was no Gucci. After all, she had spent so much time molding Maurizio into the businessman that rebuilt the Gucci empire. She deserved her name attached to that family because, damn it, she was responsible for all of Maurizio's success that he just threw the fuck away. Alright, class, who knows how to spell delusional? So, to make herself feel better, Patrizia throws an elegant, over-the-top, lavish birthday party for one of her daughters, and while schmoozing with the guests, just slipped it in that she was gonna teach Maurizio a lesson. Ooh, honey, don't get behind a pissed-off ex. At that party, she ended up asking a famous lawyer what would happen if she got rid of Maurizio. He kinda laughed and brushed the question off because, like, what the fuck kind of a question is that? And so when she asked the lawyer the same question again a month later, he wrote back telling her that she needs to stop fucking around and quit asking him this kind of bullshit. So what does her ass do? Talk even louder about wanting to off her ex-husband. She went to everyone she knew, family, friends, household staff, the husband of the cleaning lady, asking if anyone would be willing to kill Maurizio. Like, how big of a demand is this? Is this too much to ask? I think not. And in the blink of an eye, she became obsessed with this notion. Like, all she could think about day and night was having Maurizio killed. Like, this was bitter X to, like, the nth degree. She resented him for leaving her. She couldn't stand that her social status was deteriorating. She wanted this man dead so she could regain her Queen Gucci title, damn it. And this thought absolutely consumed her. Like, you and I would daydream about winning the lottery or going to Disney World. She would daydream about all the ways she could take out Maurizio and what she'd spend his money on. Her head was so overcome with all of these thoughts until one day the thoughts were replaced by debilitating headaches. And she thought, fuck my diamond rings with a Gucci leather whip, this shit isn't normal. And after days of just mind-numbing pain, Patrizia finally goes to the hospital and was diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of a billiard ball. That's pretty fucking big. Doctors were like, we gotta get this shit out, like, right now. And on the day of her surgery, Maurizio wasn't anywhere to be found. Turns out the tumor was benign, but the doctors requested that Maurizio not make an appearance because it could stress her the fuck out. So instead of showing up, he sent some flowers, and literally all the card said was his name, which really pissed her off. It wasn't like get well soon, it wasn't love you lots, it was Maurizio. Ooh, cold. And she was really upset over this. It kind of seemed like there was a serious love-hate relationship going on. Like, she wanted his support and for him to be there to comfort her and to love her, but she also just wanted his money. And if he wasn't gonna give her any of that shit, then he was more valuable to her dead than he was alive. But at this point, he really didn't want to be with Patrizia. Like, he sent her the flowers just as a kind gesture, but clearly he didn't give a rat's fat ass about her anymore. And this just really made Patrizia so upset. Like, she was allowed to hate people, but if anybody didn't like her, oh my god, it was like, fuck this guy. To her, this was just one of the hundreds of ways that he'd screwed her over, and she could see there was nothing left to this relationship except for the Gucci name. And so that night in Patrizia's journal, all she wrote was the word vengeance. The bitch was mad before, but now she was out for blood. And that day, after a nearly 10-year separation, their divorce became final. Like, ooh, ouch. I don't know about you, but I personally would be pleased as a tickled titty if I were given a yearly stipend, a few houses in Milan, New York City, Monte Carlo, literally anything that I could ever want. But Miss Patrizia called this a mere plate of lentils, and this meat-hungry money hoe wasn't gonna stop at anything short of filet mignon. And to top her anger off, Maurizio was simply flourishing. Yes, he'd been let go of Gucci, but he attained a new lease on life. His skin was glowing. Every day was a good hair day. He had a new girlfriend who appeared not to be so new. It seems he may have dabbled a little bit outside of the marital mattress, if you know what I'm saying. Which, of course, also added to Patrizia's anger, which, I mean, at least that shit is justified. But now he and his new gal had moved in together. They were renovating a giant-ass apartment in Milan, filling it with the finest furnishings and art, paintings made with caviar and the tears of Persian puppies, all the works, and the couple would travel the world looking for specific pieces, and travel ain't cheap when you're high-class bitches, I would assume. But if they weren't flying first class or renting an entire plane, they were sailing in Maurizio's luxury boat, which happened to be the largest wooden sailboat in the world. Of fucking course it was. And they had a few little renovations going. How much did the boat renovations cost? A mere $25 million. Just a drop in that gold-plated bucket. The big-ass apartment alone was almost $25K a month, and ooh, Patrizia was livid. Not only because her ex-man found new love, but because she was worried they were going to spend all of the money that she felt should be hers. Like, what if this new girl has children? Then they'd inherit all that cash and there'd be nothing left for her. Because again, nearly $1 million a year for the rest of your life simply isn't enough, especially if there needs to be money left for her daughters to inherit. But in her defense, Maurizio was spending faster than he could earn it. After all, he'd not really had a job since he'd been fired from Gucci, so there wasn't like a steady flowing income to make his new girlfriend and his ex-wife happy. But Maurizio didn't know any different. Like, he grew up with wealth and surrounded himself with the best of the best because he could, and that's just how he fucking rolled. Like, he still had millions from his Gucci buyout, but Patrizia's head was just fucking boiling when she saw he was using it to make risky investments. Which, again, not to defend Patrizia, but like, I get that. She knew Maurizio was, I wouldn't say a lousy businessman, but certainly not a good one. And having nearly ran a global company into the ground, she knew that risky business investments really weren't a really good idea for this fella. Like, that monthly stipend can't last forever if there's no cash to give. And then the vacation homes will have to start being sold to pay for things, and before you know it, she's just one of us normal peasants shopping at Nordstrom Rack. But if Maurizio was somehow magically out of the picture, there'd be no one to spend the money, make silly business investments, and spend $250,000 a year on some apartment with some girl. So Patrizia turns to her bestie boo, a woman named Pina, like Pina Colada, but we're gonna call her Panini. Anyways, Patrizia asks for her advice. Both of these friends had a huge love for tarot cards and psychics and really put a lot of faith into these methods of fortune telling. I guess they even tiptoed a little bit in the dark arts and black magic, but I don't think at any point they were like super serious about it. Media gets a hold of this information, calls Panini a black witch, and basically says they're both shooting spells out their hooters left and right, trying to manipulate the Gucci family with this magic. Manipulate, yes, but with magic, probably not. They knew that if Maurizio was to be murdered, it would be by their own accord, or at least by somebody they could hire to pull the trigger, so just like that, Patrizia was planning a murder. Panini scrounged up her contacts and felt that the best option for finding someone to take Maurizio out would be to go to the sleazy doorman she found at a sketchy-ass hotel in the nastiest part of Milan. He was just a petty little thief, but he told Panini that he could find someone to do the job as long as they had a down payment. Patrizia's like, yeah, whatever, fine, here's my money. She had no problem forking it over for that cause, but she'll be damned if she lets Maurizio spend his own money. But soon a few days turned into a few weeks, those weeks turned into months, and Patrizia's like, why the fuck is Maurizio still alive? Like, what a bitch gotta do? So Panini was like, girl, I ain't up for this middleman shit. How about I introduce you to the doorman and you can work your shit out? So she meets the doorman, and in typical Patrizia fashion, this whole show was immediately in full swing. Like, you gotta admit, she is absolutely the villain in this story, or at least one of the villainous characters, but she gets shit done like mama doesn't play. So on that day, March 27th of 1995 at 8:30 a.m., a gunman followed Maurizio into his office building and put 4 bullets into his body and vanished into his getaway car. Once again, who the fuck does that in broad daylight? Meh. Witnesses, which there were witnesses, they all said the shooter looked like a 40 to 45-year-old man in a jean jacket and a baseball cap. And police knew that Maurizio had way more enemies than he did friends, but his girlfriend was the first to point a finger, and I won't say which finger, but she pointed it at Patrizia. After all, at this point, it really wasn't a secret that she had wanted Maurizio killed, but also, can you imagine that? Like, knowing that there are people that want you dead and would go to the extreme of hiring a hitman on you? Like, my goodness, I would never sleep. I'd be in a bunker a mile underground with cheese puffs and muffins till I die. But though Patrizia does get shit done, she is very sloppy, as if we didn't know this already. It's not like she waltzed around town asking literally anyone to kill her ex-husband or anything. Oh wait, her ass thought she was above the law, and to add to her sloppiness, on the day of the murder, she made yet another journal entry that translated to the word paradise. Like, girl, if you're gonna plan a murder, don't fucking document that shit. Come on. Like, all you have to do is watch one Dateline episode to know the basics. And she couldn't even do that. But she was on a mission. The day after he died, Patrizia stormed into their luxury apartment Maurizio and his girlfriend had been renovating and served her with eviction papers, which had been filed a mere 3 hours after he died. The girlfriend was to collect her shit and GTFO because there was a new cowgirl in town, and I'm sure you can guess who? Yeah, it's Miss Patty. How you doing, Birdie? You doing okay? She's looking a little bit droopy, but aren't we all? A little time goes on and Patrizia's living large in her new luxury apartment. Meanwhile, investigators are trying to figure out who the fuck killed Maurizio. Of course, Patrizia was a suspect, but remember, he had so many freaking enemies, it could be 1,000 different people. And police were still going back and forth with the mafia thing, but then they'd remind themselves the mafia isn't this sloppy. Like, they certainly would not have committed a murder in broad daylight and then gotten shot. But police don't know where to look, so 2 whole years go by. Everyone knows that Patrizia had something to do with it, but nobody could prove exactly what she did. So this giant scandal that had worldwide publicity was baffling everyone, even though everyone knew who did it. That is, until a down-and-out restaurateur called into the police station saying he could link all of the people involved with Maurizio Gucci's death. Ooh, shit, honey, we're getting juicy. So the police chief meets this man who turned out to be friends with both Panini and the sketchy-ass doorman that hooked her up with a hitman. And he said that he heard a man named Ivano bragging about his involvement with the Gucci murder. Is he blowing smoke up people's asses for attention? Who knows? But either way, the police had only dead ends, so this was really valuable and the only information that they had. Apparently, Panini called the doorman, who called the owner of a local pizzeria, who called a mechanic that lived behind the restaurant, and this mechanic agreed to do the deed. So Patrizia, who has actual millions of dollars at her very disposal, didn't hire some expensive-ass hitman who would leave no traces of anything behind and no pathways to them or Patrizia. No, Miss Pennypincher hires the mechanic behind Little Caesars. Like, she is the reason why the word cheapassery was invented. And get this, she deadass thought her plan was in the bag. She had this. There is no way anything could ever be traced back to her. Girl, just come the fuck on. Nuh-uh, But also, 2 years in that luxury apartment, that was pretty damn nice, especially because she thought she'd gotten away with murder the whole damn time. Little did she know the cops were actually on her ass, and on January 31st of 97, at the early hour of 4 a.m., cops think, oh, let's surprise her with the arrest. They bang on her door, Patrizia answers and says, hold on, please wait a moment. And she came back fully glammed up with head-to-toe furs, all of her diamonds on, which paired very well with her silver handcuffs. Of fucking course. Which actually, now that I think of it, may have been kind of smart, because if they did end up taking everything away from her, like all of her money, at least she could keep what she went to jail with and sell it afterwards. So maybe she's kind of smart with that. She gets to jail, is of course stripped of everything, and for the first time, possibly ever, she becomes the same as everyone else. Suddenly, she was no more important than anyone in there. She was equal, if not at the bottom of the totem pole. And I guess she kind of cried a lot in jail too. I don't think I feel bad. I mean, she did sound like a very good business person, but that doesn't cancel out being a selfish monster and a murderer, or taking part in a murder. Whatever though, it's now been 3 years since Maurizio was murdered, and Panini and Patrizia are just sitting patiently awaiting their trials. But in the months leading up to the trials, Patrizia's jail cell ends up being raided, and police found very incriminating documents. Why those documents were there, I'm not quite sure, but shit really hit the fan at full speed from there. What were these documents, you're wondering? Well, they were the bank statements that showed the exact withdrawals for the exact amount that the hitman said they'd received. That's a big fucking uh-oh, baby. Which was just another indication that she thought money could buy you happiness and solve all your problems. And if that wasn't bad enough, Miss Panini, Patrizia's supposed best friend, blabbed on her. She was in just as big of a pickle as Patrizia and was not coping to jail life very well either. Patrizia did tell Panini that if you keep quiet, your jail cell will be showered in gold. One could say a golden shower. But what good is having gold behind bars? It's like having stacks of cash on a deserted island. Like, what the fuck are you gonna do with that? So Panini's lawyer was like, listen girl, cooperate and you'll get a deal. After all, a life sentence is no small bag of tater tots. So 3 months before the trial, she's like, okay, yes, fuck it, I will cooperate totally and tell you anything you want to know. And the media was having a freaking heyday, like they were sucking this shit up. This was a drama-filled family that never failed to top the last story, and everyone loved it. The news was always talking about Patrizia's lawyers. Now they were wondering how the fuck they were gonna get her off when she clearly had Vegas-style lighted red arrows pointing directly at her. Like, to think it wasn't Patrizia would be ludicrous. Unless you're her lawyer, probably the only person, including Patrizia, that said she didn't do it. But no, said her lawyer, how could she have done it? After all, around the time of Maurizio's murder, she had just had her brain tumor surgery. There would be no time for her to plan a murder when she was simply too busy recovering. Plus, she wouldn't have been in a right state of mind anyways. Cue the major eye roll. Like, can you see my eyes? Are they just white? Major fucking eye roll. Well, honey, I hope you've been doing Kegels, because otherwise you're gonna shit yourself when you hear her second defense. Not only did she say she wasn't capable of planning a murder, she throws Panini's ass under the bus and said that Panini planned the whole thing and she, Patrizia, had nothing to do with it. In fact, Panini came to her asking for money to help fund this bullshit. Patrizia was out telling every Sally, Bob, and Margaret around town that she wanted this man dead and will literally hire anyone's cousin to kill him. And now she's done a full 180? And not only that, but Panini said that if she didn't get the money, she would blackmail her by going public and physically harming her daughters. The gay gasp at it all. Oh, I simply can't contain myself. What is one to do? Yeah, well, it didn't take very long for the jury members to smell that bullshit wafting off Patrizia. Her case really went to hell in a handbag when the escaped car driver confessed as well, hoping for leniency with his jail time. Obviously, things aren't really going that great for Patrizia, so she decided to play the innocent good girl in court. She did away with her jewels and her furs and replaced them with plain slacks and a rosary around her neck. But honey, it would take more than a few rounds of Hail Marys to get her ass out of this barrel of pickles. And after just 7 hours, the jury found everyone involved Gucci guilty. Cheers to that. Everyone except for the gunman, who ended up getting life in prison, received between 25 and 29 years. Patrizia wanted to be the head of Gucci, and instead she was the head of a sloppy-ass murder scheme, so she got the full 29. But with good behavior, she could still be out while she's in her 60s. And I guess her jail time was really kind of hellish. It certainly wasn't the palace she was used to. She'd been attacked several times by inmates and had suffered many seizures from the tumor surgery. This definitely wasn't what Patrizia had pictured her life to be. She had just wanted what she thought was best for her daughters, which was to have an inheritance, and now, when she was out of prison, she'd have to rely on her daughter's inheritance herself. Like, had she just sat her ass down and been grateful for what she'd been gifted, she could have been sipping limoncello on her balcony in Italy. But instead, she was locked up in a jail cell. And while Patrizia was serving her time, one of her daughters really promoted that her mom was innocent and was saying that Panini was to blame for this. And this case affected her so much that she herself began studying law to try to free her mom. But jail gave Patrizia a lot of time to sleep, and she was actually allowed to have plants. And her lawyer even negotiated the right to have her ferret Bambi stay with her as a special privilege. Unfortunately, though, the ferret did pass away because one of her fellow inmates sat on it, so that's sad. But after over 20 years in prison, she was offered a deal for an early release if she could find a job. Just the very idea of working disgusted her so much that she said no. Can you fucking imagine? Like, you'd rather be in prison than work? But eventually she did come around. She took a job at a famous jeweler, and she's really not been that quiet about her part in the murder either. Like, when somebody asked why she didn't just shoot him, she said her eyesight wasn't good enough and she didn't want to miss. I guess at least she's honest. But get this, shiz, even after years of this fiasco happening, she still considers herself a Gucci and would love nothing more than to be offered a creative role in the company. My dear, don't hold your breath. But before we close, just as a little add-in, we shan't forget what Maurizio brought to Gucci, because he may have made some poor business choices, yes. But at the end of the day, he was a Gucci and had the family's creativity in his blood, so he absolutely brought a lot to the company. I think it would be a shame to let the crazy story of Patrizia ending his life outshine the things that he did during his life. Like, without him, Gucci certainly wouldn't be back at the luxurious level that they're at today. So I guess the direction of some of his choices honestly were good and applaudable, so you go. As for Patrizia, she's still around now and is trying to live her best life. You never know, you might even spot her walking the streets with a parrot perched on her shoulder. Maybe even looking a little bit like that. What do you think? So yeah, let me tell you right the fuck now, Google this shit. The amount that I had to leave out saddens me to no end. But if you have a moment of free time, just read a single article about this case or the family and you will be enthralled. I guarantee it. So yeah, there's our little story. Much different than our other stories, but still very, very interesting. I still can't believe all of the craziness that happened. And also the fact that people who are watching this unfold were just looking at it as entertainment when somebody's life actually ended because of all this. Humans are just a weird species. Much rather be a parrot. But yes, my loves, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sitting through my entire story. Please let me know down in the comments below other stories you'd like me to check out. I am always interested. Like, never think that I'm not. But there you go. I have to go take all of this shit off now because it is hot. But really and truly, from the bottom of my little sparkly heart, thank you so much for being here. I love having you. And if at any point you decide, hey, I would love to have a little bit more Nady in my life, please feel free to check out my Patreon. It's patreon.com/poplux. You get videos a day early, Patreon only content, and best part, it's cheap, fun, and fancy just like me. And like always, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell down below so that you're notified anytime I upload a new video. Don't forget my newest collection of highlighters, including Black Ice, which does change from black to white, will be available again soon at thepoplux.com. Also, my latest album, Kiss of Fame, is available everywhere online that music is sold. Thank you so much to everyone who's supporting them. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at officialnady, and you can follow me online at thepoplux.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye.